Last time I finished inlaying this piece of wood in the edge of a door. That'll be a door going through the forward bulkhead. And I've cut away some of the core, leaving just the fiberglass sticking up, maybe a half an inch or so on either side. And I'm smearing some thickened resin along the edges, on the fiberglass, on the edges of that trench that I've cut out. And now I'm gluing a piece of wood in there, just like I did on the door. And that's so that it will hold a screw, because the core itself is too weak for that. And what I'm doing here is I'm marking some chopped strand mat, just a tiny bit wider than the door and the bulkhead itself. And I'm cutting out all these little strips. And these are to seal the edge of the core where it's been cut. There's fiberglass on the top and bottom of each panel, but the edges are open. And so that's what this fiberglass is going to do, is close in the edges. And some of the core was sticking up higher than the fiberglass on the sides when I ground it back. So I'm cutting that away so that it doesn't hold that chopped strand mat away from the edges. The only place it's really going to be glued on is to the fiberglass on the top and bottom of the panel. And it's not really going to, the glue really isn't going to hold it to the core very well. So the core had to be ground back so that the chopped strand could make contact with the fiberglass on each side. And because I'm going to play with resin again, everything gets wiped down with acetone. And here I'm putting resin on the edge and mostly making sure that it's on the fiberglass on each side. And I lay that little strip of chopped strand mat over the edge, making sure that it makes contact with the wet fiberglass on both the top and bottom of the panel. And once that's sort of stuck there in the resin that I'd put down previously, I wet out that whole strip of fiberglass. And I can do two pieces at the same time. While one is hardening, I can be working on the other. So this is the door. And once that's got pretty much tacked off, I can turn the part and do another side of it. That little piece of fiberglass sticking off of the door, you can see how difficult it is to cut now that it's actually hardened all the way. It would have been a lot easier to do that while the resin was still soft. And basically the same process goes all the way around, sealing the edges of both panels. The outside of the bulkhead won't get sealed like this because it's just going to be glued to the walls of the boat, but the inside of the bulkhead where the door will be, that's going to show. So I'm going to do that, and I'm also doing all around the part that is basically the door. And the way you put the resin on is basically too thick. You want a lot of it on those edges. And that's a little bit wider than the panel. So I've got some fiberglass sticking up, at the edge of the door and at the edge of every place where I've sealed the panels. So I'm just coming back with the sander, and if you run the sander flat on the side, the top or bottom, you'll grind off that excess fiberglass right flush with the surface. And it actually makes a pretty nice looking finished edge. Once I've cleaned the dust off, you can get a look at what it looks like now. You can still see the honeycomb through it a little bit, but the edge is closed. And so I've got a hole for a door in the bulkhead and a door itself. But there's no real door frame or whatever it is when you close a door and it hits against something and doesn't swing all the way through, to the other side. Whatever you call that, I don't have that. So I'm going to lay up some fiberglass on this glass. And it's wax on, wax off, and then you have to wait probably 20 minutes or so for the wax to harden before putting the next layer on. Or you can put 5 layers of wax on there if it's, immediate after buffing, and it's as though you only have 1 layer. And because the door was made with the thinner fiberglass cloth, the pieces that were cut out of the door, the 1708, those are basically scrap pieces of fiberglass. So I'm just laying up all 4 pieces of that on this glass. And once I've peeled it off, then I'll have a pretty thick sheet of fiberglass that I can glue along the edge of the door to be that thing that stops the door from swinging through the doorway and to the other side. And the peeling part is kind of interesting, and I'm doing a lot of this at normal speed so you can hear the crackling. And you can see kind of how the process goes. Yeah, so don't freak out when you hear all these noises happening. And I get a wedge in, and then I get a wedge in next to it, and move it along. And you can see where the fiberglass is separating from that glass shower door. And some of it, I can peel it by hand gently. I don't want to, break the panel or cause some damage to the fiberglass I'm making. So when I get to a spot where it really wants to stick, I go back to shoving wedges in, and that'll loosen it up a bit, and then I can peel some more by hand. And eventually you'll get it down to a small enough spot that it'll come loose. And there you go, it's free. Those white spots were a little bit of the 1708 didn't get wetted out completely through. But this will work perfectly good for the purpose of being the door frame. And we'll see about doing something with that next time.